All right. Hey, Justin, welcome to, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm calling this. I mean, I guess it is a podcast, but I just decided to start talking to other voice actors in the industry and other people that do this stuff and just get their opinions. So, welcome to the podcast, I guess.
Hey, thanks for having me for the
Absolutely.
podcast, We Guess.
Yeah, we guess. I don't know. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yourself?
Very, very well. And you
Awesome.
were talking to me before we even started. You said you just got back from where again?
I was just in Buenos Aires, Argentina, shooting
Yes.
a commercial. And because of that, I'm actually super behind on all my voiceover stuff because I didn't take any of my gear with me because I kind of
Yep.
thought that'd be a good time to just enjoy time away from the studio.
You would want
Um,
to.
yeah, exactly. So, but now I'm doing catch up this week. So
Yep.
it's a good week, a busy week, but a good one.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's just jump right in. I have some questions for you. So you took one of my classes. Man, it's been like what, 2, 3 years ago,
Yeah, I
something
think
like
so. I
that.
think it was in 21, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. And I got to know you, and we really hit it off super well. And I've just been in contact with you ever since. And so you're in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you, I know that they shoot a lot of stuff around you, which is awesome. So you're always doing commercials and stuff, but you're also always doing voiceover stuff. And I know back when I met you, you were on pay to plays, and I think you're still on pay to plays a lot. And so I thought, well, I used to talk to him a lot about pay to plays, so he'd be the perfect person to get on here and talk about pay to plays with. So that's what pretty much this whole podcast is going to be about, just talking about pay to plays, your experience with them, and just how that's going. So I guess before we even get to pay to plays, I wanted to ask you, when in your life did you start thinking about actually doing voiceover and being like, that's something I want to do?
Yeah, I think I've wanted to be an actor since like grade 6, and I think that just as I started to kind of pursue and take in films and TV shows and stage productions, I started to kind of learn all the different ways that you can be an actor. And as I've grown up and trained in theater and in film and TV and musicals, music and stuff like that, I started to realize that the mediums are so vast in the performing industry. And so I've always, via my agent, kind of like done auditions for theater and film and TV and commercials and voiceover, whether it be animation or commercials and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I've kind of always been in and around it. I've always done auditions and stuff via my agency, but I would say voiceover specifically, it's got to be like Robin Williams in Aladdin probably is like where I was like, oh,
Yes.
I would love to do that.
Yes. Oh, that's like okay, that's perfect. Yeah. And you know what's crazy? It's like, I remember when I was seeing that, and I don't know what it is. I know people are just different, but I didn't even put two and two together back then that like, oh yeah, he's in a booth or like in a space recording that voice. Like I was just like, woo, I was fully in it. Oh, he's definitely the genie, right?
Yeah,
You know?
100%. And then there's
Yeah.
also that, like, there's that tale that came out years later that they had, like, 8 hours of audio from Robin Williams, and they had
Oh
to cut
yeah.
it all down into the movie because he's just like he was an amazing improviser and
Oh yeah.
all that stuff.
One of the best, for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, awesome. All right, well, okay. So now another kind of foundational question. What is a pay to play?
Yeah, so a pay to play, I guess, they take different forms, but basically it's like a site where you get access to voiceover auditions or any other work, really. But there is some sort of structure in place that you either pay a percentage of the work fee that you're paid, or you pay to be a member of the site to get access to the auditions. Some
Okay.
have one, just like a platform fee on jobs, others have a membership, and then some have both. You pay a membership and you pay a platform fee on the jobs that you book.
Awesome. Okay, so it's pretty much cutting out the agent in a way, right? It's cutting out the middleman because it's just you and that site.
Yeah, it's cutting out a few people actually, which
Yeah.
I think is great for lower budget B2B explainers and whiteboard explainer type videos that companies want to do. I've even seen postings for well-known companies I know here in Toronto, based in Canada, that are doing like a boardroom meeting and they want to do a PowerPoint, but they've got a bit of a budget, so they want to add a voiceover to it. Where traditionally that would be sent to a casting director to then have casting sessions in studio, which then you need to hire a studio, like studio time, an engineer, a director. All that sort of stuff is now kind of cut out, and they can just post on a pay to play. People that are interested can audition. If they like the voice and they think you can deliver it the way they want it, then they can hire you directly. You record it, they stick it on the PowerPoint, and Bob's your uncle.
There you go. Awesome. Okay. Well, okay, let me ask you this. So you do have an agent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the ratio between like how much you book on pay to play versus how much you book with an agent?
For voiceover specifically,
Yeah.
I book way more unpaid plays, mainly because I'm not auditioning for things with super high amounts of competition. So
Okay.
I think of things like broadcast commercials, online commercials, commercial voiceover as being extremely competitive. And also, there's people who are established here in Toronto and in Canada that are kind of the voices that people go to the most.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they have to audition most of the time, like I have to audition. And if my audition beats out their audition, great. But the majority of the time, there is that relationship with casting and the agent and all that sort of stuff that I think helps you to kind of get some consistent work. So with my agent, this is a wild stat. Since I've been doing voiceover out of my house I started in 2019.
Yeah.
Since 2019, I have booked 2 paid voiceover jobs via my agent. One was a radio commercial that had 2 30-second spots, and the other was just a Source Connect session to record a pitch for a voiceover for a commercial. So I wasn't in the commercial, but I was hired, had a fee to jump on Source Connect and record a voiceover for like an animatic to pitch a commercial for an ad agency or for a director.
Right.
But those are
Okay.
the only 2 things voiceover-wise I've booked through my agent. Now, that
Wow.
being said, things run, I think, a little differently up in Canada here than
Okay.
they do in the States. But for me, because I use my agent for voiceover theater and on camera work,
Yeah.
whether commercial, film, or TV, like that few voiceover auditions is kind of fine because
Yeah.
I've also have I have a lot of experience in theater and in on-camera commercials.
Yeah.
So that's where the majority of my work has been. And then I
Yeah.
work with my agent to kind of diversify and get into more mediums, which is kind of what I'm doing now with film and TV and voiceover.
That's what's funny is like I remember just like as the years have gone by since I've met you, it's just hilarious because I'll just be watching Hulu or whatever, what have you, and I see you all the time in commercials, and I'm always texting you like, just saw you again, It's like so obviously you do a lot of that.
Yeah, I do a lot of commercials and a lot of theater. Theater was my background. That's where I did my training. And then
Wow.
commercials kind of came out of the fact that when you're doing theater, you have lots of downtime. You might do a
Sure.
6 or 8 week contract, then have 4, 6, 8, 3, 4 months off before your next contract, especially when you're starting out. So
Yeah.
those commercial auditions kind of filled the time, filled a bit of the income void and stuff like that. And it was out of having success in both theater and in commercials that
Yeah.
made me say, hey, the more I diversify, the
Yeah.
more I can specialize and be good at different mediums, the more opportunity I have for income all around as a performer. And so I've
Absolutely.
been really lucky. I think since 2018, 2019, around then, pandemic notwithstanding,
Right.
I've made my living as an actor
Yeah.
full time with all the income sources that I have, whether that be pay to play, jobs I book through my agent,
Yeah.
theater, film, TV, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that's such a huge, powerful thing because, like, you got to diversify. Like that's
Yeah.
like huge.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in your previous in the previous question you had mentioned competitiveness, So I guess I've had a few voiceover teachers in the past or studios that you know they it's just they kind of gave the feeling that pay to plays weren't competitive, and it's not that, it's like, oh, pay to plays aren't that competitive. It's not like being with an agent. Whereas I have a totally different view on that, like totally different view. And I wanted to get your view on it because you're doing it day in and day out. So for someone just starting out, is pay to play something that's like, oh, that's easier. I'm going to start there and I don't have to do that much? Or is it pretty competitive?
Like, it's both. It is very competitive. If you want to get your feet wet, I think pay to plays are a good place to start because you
Yeah.
might luck out and just do 100 auditions and get a job. I
Agreed.
can tell you that was not my experience. I don't know what the number count was, but I started auditioning January 15th, 2019, and my first job didn't come until end of February, March,
Sure.
maybe. So, like, my first year on Voices, I booked maybe 2 jobs, which
Right.
is awful. And I was also spending like 8-hour days just doing auditions, which I don't do
Right.
anymore. Now I do all my auditions in 2 to 3 hours. And I
Yeah.
used to do 8 auditions a day. And now I'm doing 30, sometimes 30 plus auditions a day in way less time. So that's
Yeah.
also part of like the workflow. The sites are competitive, obviously.
Yeah.
They're competitive though for many different reasons.
Yeah.
Like I've heard people say that on voices specifically, that many of the jobs are hired within the first 30 respondents.
Gotcha.
So if you're not one of the first 30 respondents, maybe do that audition really quickly. Don't bother giving 2 takes, kind of move off of it quick and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Also to constantly be refreshing your inbox to make sure that the jobs that are recently posted, you submit for immediately. So there's that kind of competition to be the first one to reply.
Yeah.
Then there's the whole other end of the competition, which is having good audio quality, having good reads to
Yeah.
your auditions.
Yeah.
Those are completely separate things that can also put you in or out of the running really quickly.
Right.
If they listen to your audio and it sounds like you're in a bathroom, I think 99% of people, whether they're audio engineers listening or not, are just going to be like, no, like I
Yeah.
can't fix that,
Right.
So I think that what I've learned from the pay to plays is to give myself a competitive edge is to have the best quality audio, to be coaching and working on my reads,
Yeah.
every once in a while to make sure my reads are up to standards. Then there's things you can do to that afterwards, which is like when you book a job, providing the audio really quickly so that the
Yeah.
client is like, oh, they're really quick to work with and they turn around stuff really quickly. That is
Yeah.
also stuff that I think can help with the competitive nature. But to say that they're just not competitive, I would say is very, very maybe a misguided thought because
Yeah.
on many of these platforms, whether it's Voices, Voice 123, Upwork, Fiverr, maybe like there are millions of voice talent on the platform.
Right. And that
So
was always what I would say or what I would think is like whenever somebody would be like hinting towards pay to plays not being that competitive and like, oh, just jump on a pay to play, just throw together a demo and it'll, and then you can get your feet wet. And I'm like thinking, okay, it's a pay to play. It's not like being with it is kind of like being with an agent, but yeah, it's different. I get it. But what I would always tell people is there are certain things you can't control. Like if you audition for something and you happen to remind that casting director of, maybe someone that their wife had previously dated at some point and they, you know what I mean? Like you can't help that. And so they just don't like you immediately. You can't help
Yeah.
that. But what I was always like, you can help like 100%. Get your audio dialed in and nailed down because that's something that you can get done, check off, and move on. Something like coaching, that's something that you should probably just be always kind of doing, and you can always be progressing. But with the audio, you can get that set and done and move on and focus on the coaching. And then the home studio is just set.
yeah,
And then you're going to
exactly.
be on top of other people because, if they hear you and they hear me and they hear 30 other people, well, what if those 30 other people sound like they're in a bathroom? Well, guess what? Now it's just
Yeah.
between you and me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
And that's some of the feedback that I've heard from studios that I've connected with via Source Connect over the last few years, and then also on different pay-to-play platforms when I've reached out to like customer service. Many of them are giving me hints like your audio quality is probably in the top 95th, if not 99th percentile
Boom.
of just sheer audio quality stats, right? Like
Yeah.
a noise floor of minus 73 or 75 is kind of unheard of,
Right.
which gives me so much space to do compression and
Yeah.
equalize things because my noise floor is so low, I can afford to raise it up 10 dB and still be within broadcast
That's like
standards.
a professional studio noise
Yeah,
floor.
for sure. And then
So,
same
like-
with the same with all the treatment and everything, how dead it is in here.
Yeah.
If someone wants to add a bit of reverb to my voice, they can do that on their own. But
Yep.
I'm not giving them audio where they've got to remove or toy with it.
Right.
I think one of my favorite quotes, and this has happened at least 3 times on Source Connect, is I connect for a test call, and they listen to me talk. They go, "Oh, can you move your gain up a little bit? Yeah, bring it back down. Yeah, that sounds great. What microphone are you? Where are you?" Like they don't even get through the first question. It's just, what microphone are you using? Where are you? And then I go, oh, well, you'd really appreciate this. I built a 6x7
Yeah.
booth in my house.
Yep.
It's a room within a room. It's
Yep.
decoupled from the wall, ceilings, and floors.
Yep.
I have an exterior steel door as my door to the studio with all the weather stripping, so it's
Yep.
airtight. And it's acoustically treated and audio engineer vetted. So
Yep.
it's a really great space to record in.
At 100%. Yeah, I remember you telling me like you got out of my class, you built that space, and then we kind of worked together as far as like treating it and getting the bass traps where they needed to and the panels and all that stuff. And you had reached out to me a few weeks later and you said that somebody got on a Source Connect with you and they said that your audio, they work with like pro studios, and they said your audio is better than all the pro studios we work with.
Yeah,
And I
that
was
was
like,
that was even before I built this studio. That was when I was
really?
in the bedroom closet.
Oh, that was just,
That was bedroom closet at my old house after I stopped kind of using foam for everything and got
yeah,
actual bass traps for the corners to drop those low frequencies, and then put a
right.
few panels in front, behind, and on the side of me to kind of eat up some of those mid
Oh
and
yeah,
highs that the foam wasn't grabbing.
yeah, I totally forgot.
Yeah.
You built this way after. So this was just once you took my class, you treated that space.
Yes.
And then later you're like, I'm going to build my own studio.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
because we moved and we had the space for it. And I told my wife at the time, I said, I'm happy to move because we were having another child. We wanted to get a bigger space.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm happy to move, but if we're going to do it, we need to have like a dedicated workspace for me, a dedicated studio space. And I
Yeah.
had looked at the fourth bedroom, which is upstairs, and this room, which is in the basement. And I actually came at our last walkthrough. I brought my recording equipment and
Yes.
recorded room tone in both spaces and sent it to
Yes.
you. And you were like, I do the basement. Just based on you running the audio through Audition and looking at the waveform and being like, oh, I'd probably do it in the basement. There's, there was
Absolutely.
less mid or low frequencies or whatever.
Yeah.
Plus, when you're in the basement, you get ground insulating you a little bit as well. And in
Yes.
the basement, you're further away from the noise of the house.
100%.
It's a side split, so we have like stairwells that come all the way down. There's no
Yeah.
doors that separate my space, like the basement, from the upstairs.
Yeah.
So I created all of that. I built a
Exactly.
6x7 box, then separated it from the walls, the ceiling, and the roof, then built another wall on the outside. So there's like my studio door, you walk out of it, then you walk out another door
Yes.
to get into the basement.
And
So
that's
it's like a
such
real room
pro
within
build.
a room.
That is such a pro build.
It's very close.
Yeah.
If I do it again, I would probably not do I did a double walled unit where they're touching. I would probably I'd use 2x6 studs and do staggered studs so I could weave the insulation in between. And then I'd gain a
100%.
little bit more square footage in here. But
Yeah.
honestly, right now, I have way more than I need.
Oh,
I
yeah.
sit for 99% of recording sessions.
Yeah.
So as long as I can sit and be at my microphone and see my screens, I'm good.
And that's what I was going to say. Like you were talking about it being in the basement and it being better. A lot of people deal, if they do choose a basement, a lot of people deal with like footsteps from above. But because you built what you built and it separated everything, you built a room within a room or whatever, you don't have to deal with that. Plus, I think you said it was a little off. But that's what most people do to deal with footsteps.
Yeah, I deal with still a little bit of footsteps. They're the
Yeah.
only thing that can eke into my audio is
But you can just
literal
low pass
stomping
that.
upstairs.
Yeah,
just
you can-
stomping.
Yeah.
People can walk through the kitchen is above me to my
high
left,
pass.
and the dining room is directly above my head.
Yeah.
And if kids are running from like the living room to the dining room back and forth, jumping off the couch, I
Yeah.
hear the slightest thud, which
Yeah.
sometimes if it's in the middle of a good take, I'll still send. Because
Absolutely.
I'm like, if the engineer's good and they hear the thud,
Yeah.
they'll just go into isotope and cut it out.
Yeah, they can cut it out, or they could just use a high pass filter and it would knock it out because it's just
Yeah.
thud, subharmonic content. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's not a deal breaker.
No, for sure. And I just think that, I mean, the overall thing with building the studio and having solid audio is that it literally takes that worry out of the mix for me,
100%.
which at the beginning was like 70% of my worry.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't know if the audio is any good. And then I was like, I don't know if my reads are any good.
Yeah.
Turns out my audio was bad and my reads were bad.
But you just nailed what I tell people. I'm like, look, you have so much to worry about as a voice actor. You really do. There's a lot of things to think and worry about. Why do you want to also worry about your audio? Get that thing nailed down, because once it's done, now all you're thinking and worried about is like my delivery, my read, script breakdown, whatever, not the
Oh,
audio.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I can't tell you the number of times I haven't been a good voice actor and I don't quickly double check my levels before recording. And I'm like, oh no, I recorded it pretty low. I'm just like, I'll just
Doesn't
compress it
matter
and
in there.
normalize it because my noise floor is so low.
Exactly.
I can afford my noise floor being minus 65 dB.
Right.
So why don't I just normalize the whole thing to -3,
Yeah.
then do my compression and my EQ, and then normalize it again, and it still won't matter because my noise floor is never going to be above 60.
Right.
Like
That is
never.
the beauty of what you've done in there. You
Yeah,
know,
it
it's
it
like even
helps me out
less
a
to worry
lot.
about. Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge. Like what you were just talking about as far as pay to plays and competition, and like being one of the first to jump in on something. It helps you out a lot in your workflow. Like you have less to worry about and less to do. And it makes you more efficient. It makes you faster. And then you're going to get auditions done quicker and you're going to get them in faster. And then you might book, because you're so quick. And they're also just going to be like, dang, Justin's got a super fast turnaround time. Like, of course we're going to work with him,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
I think all of it helps, right? Like the more
Yeah.
well versed you are at the audio side, the read side, and if you can turn things around fast, make yourself available, all those things help.
And so all of that ties into my next question, which we've already kind of touched on a few of these, but can you think of any others or even just reemphasize the ones we talked about, which is, someone's looking to get into voiceover and they're going to get on a pay to play site. How can you stand out on a pay to play site?
Very good. Good question. I feel like, at least in my experience, the reads and the audio quality.
Yeah.
Because the reads are the thing that's going to win you the job.
Yep.
The audio quality to me is something that makes them worry less about you. Because
Yes.
they might hear a brilliant read, but recorded on an iPhone, like mic or something. And then they're like, wow, that person's got a great read, a real connection to the character. I think they'd connect well with our audience, but we can't use that audio.
Yeah.
So I wonder what else they have. So then it becomes like there's a barrier. It's like, okay, we love their read, but there's the barrier of the audio quality. Well, let's ask them, do you always use that microphone? Is that what let's go to their profile, check out their demos. Oh, these are professionally recorded demos.
Yeah.
Let's look at some other samples that they've posted. Oh, these sound professional too. They must have a booth. Let's reach out to them. But like all of those steps
It's
are
gonna,
are
yeah.
times where you're limiting your bookability. Whereas you
Yeah.
send a super great read with perfect audio,
Yeah.
they're just like, yeah, that one.
Because you're causing them to do more work. And that's
Exactly.
not okay. That's never okay. If you make this is what I always say is like, if you can make everyone's job easier, you are so much more bookable,
Yeah.
and that's part of
100%.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's a lot to do. That also comes into play, like when I submit my auditions, I do a version of basically this kind of like clean but simple processing that
Yeah.
I learned from your class, and
Right.
then just from messing around on my own to just kind
Yeah.
of be like, this is going to heighten my audition, but it's also not going to raise red flags to an engineer to be
Yes.
like, oh, I think there's some denoising in there, and it sounds like some of the plosives are really cutting
Yeah.
off really quickly. Like, if they
Yeah.
don't hear any of that, they're just like, oh, this is like really well compressed and EQ'd vocal. This sounds great. Then I
And
feel like there's
that's
less worries.
Yeah, and that's what I teach is responsible processing, the
Mm,
processing that, and I've heard so many engineers say this, and it's so true. It's the best processing you can give is processing that you can't hear.
mm,
That is the best you can give. The transparent processing where they can't even tell you've processed your audio, but what you've done has improved your audio and improved your dynamics and improved your noise floor and improved all these things. But on their end, they're not sitting there going, "Oh yeah, they overcompressed that," or "Oh yeah, they definitely EQ'd the crap out of that." They
yeah.
don't even hear it. So like, it's helping, but in a secret way, in a way, you know what I mean? But it
Oh
helps.
yeah,
It
for
just
sure.
puts you it's just that little bit that puts you up above the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this one's a touchy one. I don't think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong. You're in the pay to play world, so you're going to know immediately if this is still an issue or if it's not. I remember you telling me that they were doing away with it. I hope that they still are or have.
Hmm.
But the term in perpetuity, is that
Oh yeah.
something that you still have to worry about on pay to plays? First off, what is that? What is in perpetuity?
Yeah, so in perpetuity basically just means that they have the right to use the end product for forever, indefinitely, without your permission.
Yep.
And that has, in the industry, become quite standard for anything internal video, whiteboard explainer, a video a company is going to post on their own YouTube channel or on their own owned Instagram or socials or LinkedIn or something. To kind of show off their work with the services they provide. It's like a commercial, but not, or maybe it's just an explainer about the company. It could also be like IVR is usually in perpetuity as well. Like, we're going to use your voice for our phone system, and then it'll just live on our phone system for forever until we change it. So that's what in perpetuity is.
And that can really bite voice actors, you know?
Yeah, so where in perpetuity becomes a real problem and where it is still a real problem on pay to plays, and elsewhere too. I sometimes get requests from my agent for spots that are in perpetuity, and the first thing that I write back is, "Yeah, I'll put a tape together, but let's make sure that in perpetuity is an option to get rid of. Let's
Yes.
make sure that we can create a 5-year term or a 10-year term even, just something with an expiration date."
Yeah.
The reason why it's important in advertising is that in advertising, conflicts and exclusivity are a real thing that can pop up and are requested by clients sometimes. Not always, but sometimes, especially in broadcast, like radio and TV broadcast voiceovers. So, what a conflict is or exclusivity, a conflict is basically you do a commercial for Apple. That means you can't voice commercials for Microsoft if Apple has said, we want exclusivity. We want you to represent our brand and our brand only. Now, there's usually a fee attached to that.
Right.
So, record the commercial. This is what we'll pay you. Record it and hold the computer conflict, and we'll pay you this much. Or exclusivity means you can't audition for anything like computer related for X number of years or months. We'll pay you extra for that because now you're losing out on future income.
Yeah.
So holding the conflict is pretty normal. You do, I don't know, you do a bubbly water commercial. You can't do other bubbly or pop commercials.
Yeah.
That's usually like a normal conflict, and what you're being paid should reflect that you're holding that conflict.
That's the big
Exclusivity,
deal.
yeah, exclusivity. The most famous case I feel is probably the Philadelphia cream cheese girl who was Canadian. That woman, I believe they paid exclusivity so that she couldn't do any work unless they said yes to it.
Wow.
So she couldn't do commercials anywhere else. I feel this is what I've heard. I haven't talked to her specifically.
Yeah.
But basically she wasn't allowed to do other projects without passing it by the Philly cream cheese people, basically.
Wow.
But they paid a very good amount for her to do that. Now
Right.
she still got paid every commercial she shot. She still got buyouts for every 13-week cycle that it ran on the different platforms and mediums. But she wasn't allowed to do, I don't know, maybe say like an indie film unless she ran the plot and the character by the Philly people
That's so crazy.
to be like, oh, yeah, that would be okay. Because they don't want, I don't know, like a murderous, whatever horror
Right.
scene done with their Philly cream cheese girl,
Right.
if that makes sense.
No, totally. And you've got to, as the actor, you've got to make a decision there. You got to be like, is what they're paying me worth that? You know, and hopefully it is. Hopefully it is. But yeah, you're right, because these companies are looking at the talent that are, you know, in these situations. They're looking at it like, yeah, we don't want you playing like, just take, for example, American Psycho. You know, what's his name?
Oh,
Oh, of course, because I asked what his name is.
yeah,
We can't think of
he
it.
was in
Christian
Big
Bale.
Short.
Christian Bale.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes. So like it would be like, you know, if he did American Psycho, and then they'd be like, "Oh, dude, you can't do that. That's gonna make our brand look really bad." I mean, I remember back when they shot that, they were considering DiCaprio, and his agency strongly suggested he not do that. Hey, you shouldn't do that. It's gonna ruin your image, and he decided not to, which is crazy. But that was why. It's like the image they were worried about, you know. So that
Yeah.
makes sense. I get where they're going with that, but you just got to be like, is it worth the handcuffs?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the handcuffs are worth it because it gives you the freedom to do other projects or other things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not worth it because maybe you work a lot in commercials and you're like, well, my income looks like on average it's a bit more than the exclusivity they're paying me. So maybe I go take my chances.
Yeah.
Usually, though, in those traditional senses, it's never worthwhile. It's always worthwhile to take the exclusivity and the guaranteed income. As an actor, like
Yeah.
that's gold to us. That's liquid gold.
Right.
But to get back to what you said, on pay to plays, in perpetuity still very much exists. And I think for two reasons. One is that the client may not fully understand what it is. And the second thing is they just don't want to deal with getting in touch with you again if they want to modify, rerun it, or whatever. It's almost
Yeah.
kind of like, for lack of a better term, like laziness.
Ah.
So whenever I audition for a commercial that they've requested in perpetuity, I always write in my proposal the term that I'm auditioning, like that my quote includes. It includes 1 year digital usage. And then below my proposal, I have a whole spiel on in perpetuity, which
Oh.
basically is in all of my message templates. So it gets sent to every client for every job that I do, which basically just says in perpetuity. Unfortunately, I'm not able to give rights in perpetuity for anything broadcast, radio, or digital. However, we can come to an agreement on a term, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year. The other thing too is that these companies that are making commercials almost never want to use it for forever.
Right. They just,
Because
and some of them don't even know what it means.
exactly. I'm
Yeah.
like, some of the price that you list in the ad is not going to be relevant in a year from now, not with
Yeah.
inflation.
Yeah.
So, like, even that is something, well, you'd have to come back to me anyways to get me to re-record the price if you want to run it again next year if the price has
Right.
changed.
Right.
I did a TV commercial where I did ADR in my studio. I shot the commercial, but by the time I shot the commercial and the commercial came out, I think it was like 6 months later, the price of the product had changed twice. So I did ADR for the same commercial twice to upgrade the price
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
But that was from shooting it to it just coming out on TV normal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where that is. The problem with it, I think, is twofold. The clients aren't as educated on in perpetuity, and then the voice talent aren't educated on in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there are fewer voice talent who come from a performing background. Because
Yeah.
in my world, in perpetuity is not a thing ever. Like I've never agreed to it. I've never done in perpetuity ever, and I never will,
Yeah.
because it cuts off too many things, or it could potentially cut
Yeah.
off too many things in the future.
And I just want to be really clear to the people watching. In perpetuity is a bit different than what you were talking about before, right? Because you were talking about what did you call it before? Where it's like,
Oh, like conflicts and exclusivity?
yes.
Yeah, that's very different. So
Okay.
when you agree to hold a conflict, you're agreeing, I won't audition for whatever. You do a Wendy's commercial. I agree not to audition for McDonald's, Harvey's, whatever burger joints for the term that we've agreed to. If they want to renew the commercial for the next year and have you hold that conflict again, they need to pay you the buyout again. So
Yeah.
there is an incentive for you to hold the conflict because you're being paid for it.
Yeah.
When you do a commercial in perpetuity and it's $500 for an online ad and they want to have it for forever, you're being paid $500 for forever usage.
Yep.
And if a company that competes with that company asks you to hold a conflict or exclusivity, you legally have to disclose to them, oh, I have a commercial running in perpetuity with that other competitor of yours. I hope that's not a problem. And if it is, then you'd have to backtrack to that client and say, hey, can we get rid of this in perpetuity thing? Because I got a job with McDonald's over here that I
Yeah.
want to be able to do. Right. So that's just where it gets messy. So I just don't agree to it ever because
Good.
I don't ever want to be in that position. For
Thank you. Yeah.
broadcast, I'll say, for broadcast.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think in
thank you.
perpetuity is pretty standard for everything that's business to business, internal training videos, IVR, that sort of stuff. It seems pretty standard across the industry.
Yeah, thank you for that distinction. I wanted to make sure people understood that, because in perpetuity can really bite you. Okay, so along those same lines, in perpetuity is not quite a scam. I mean, because they tell you they're doing it. I mean, if you don't know what it is, you can be like, oh, I got scammed. But along those same lines, have you ever been scammed on a pay-to-play site? Maybe just not paid. I don't know. I don't know the scenario, but have you? And if so, how did that go, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I would say I've never been scammed per
Okay.
se. There have been times where I just didn't feel confident enough to put my foot down on my own revision policy and be like, hey, this is the 4th round of revisions. I only include 2 rounds of revisions. Or like, hey, these script rewrites are 20%. My revision policy only includes script rewrites up to 10%. Like sometimes I won't like put my foot down on that stuff because I'm just like, oh, it's just a quick revision. It's 2 words, it's 5 words. I'll just do it. But then sometimes what happens is that they just think that you can just keep doing changes all of the time. And so
Yes.
then it becomes like your 4th, 5th, 6th revision. And then at some point in time, I'm like, hey, listen, my revision policy that I sent with my original proposal said 2 rounds. This is your 8th round. I'm done after this.
Yep.
Like there will be, I'm sorry, I'm not done. I'll be your voice guy, but there's going to be a fee because a $100 job or a $300 job can't last for forever. Otherwise, it's not worth the return, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
100%.
So I would
Yeah.
say that's the closest I've been to being scammed, is just not being confident in myself as
Yeah.
sole proprietor of my business to be like, hey, what you're doing now is pushing the limits of my original quote.
Right.
But I'm getting much better at that. And I do
Yeah.
find that people are actually very responsive to the boundary. You set the
Good.
boundary or you remind them of the boundary and they go, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, we'll have our team look at it over the next 2 days and then send you the last revision. Versus when you're doing revisions for them on the fly and they keep changing their minds, you just kind of like, I just sent one the other day when I was away in Argentina. I had a client touch base for a revision, and
Yeah.
I replied and said, "Yep, I've looked at that revision. It's within my revision policy. Please be reminded, this is your second revision. Any further revisions after this one, there'll be a fee."
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you just said, because I think this is so important for voice actors. And I've heard so many voice actors say what you just said, which I think is huge for a lot of people to hear. Most of the time when you put your foot down or you remind them of your policy, they go, "Oh yeah, totally." They don't get mad. They don't say you're out, They just go, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah."
Yeah. It's almost like
Yeah.
you have to remind them along the way. Like, we're both kind of holding each other's hands. When I first
Yeah.
started doing voice jobs, the person on the other hand was on the other end was holding my hand, helping me provide the audio they needed. Now I'm a bit more well versed in providing audio and good reads and varying reads. That now I sometimes have to hold the client's hand and be like, "Hey, that's your fourth revision. I only include two. The last two were only 2 words, but now you've changed half the script, so there's going to be a 50% fee charge of my
Yep.
original quote
Yep.
because now you're asking me to do half of it again."
Right.
So that usually means you have to pay again.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and most of them will be understanding. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe every once in a while you'll get some pushback, but I think most of the time they understand, man. You got to get paid for your work. You're worth the time and the investment that you've put into yourself to get to the level that you're at,
Yeah,
you know?
100%. And I also find that the ones where they give you the most pushback are the ones where the budget was never very good in the beginning.
I've always heard that too.
Yeah, I've always done like little jobs on Upwork when I was starting for like $50 or $100. And I was like, "Oh, this is great experience. I'm going to get," and then the job drags on for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so now when someone asks me, like contacts me directly, "Hey, we got this job and it's 1,500 words and our budget is $50." I go, "Oh, there's lots of people on the platform that will do it for that, but here's my rate sheet. I don't work for that."
I hope everyone listening is really taking notes with everything Justin's saying, because like that is such a wonderful response. So take note on that. Definitely do that. And then the other thing that you mentioned was your kind of disclaimer about in perpetuity at the bottom. Like that's such a big deal too. Like that's so perfect and amazing that you thought about that and you have that there. Voice actors take notes. Take notes.
Yeah, I
You
just
know.
need it to be in there because I don't want them coming back to add something later. Actually, that's the only other time I've was close to being maybe scammed is that
Okay.
the client after they hire you will change the usage and then just like
Oh.
shoot you a message being like, "Oh, by the way, we're actually going to do 6 months digital and 6-month broadcast." And I'm like, "Broadcast where? Regional, local, national?" And they go, "Yeah, national." And I go, "Great. Well, that fee will be like an extra 2,500
Yeah.
to get, you some broadcast usage for 6 months
Yeah.
nationally on TV. Oh, well, we really only have like an extra $250." And I was like, "Then you can't have the broadcast usage. Sorry."
How
Like,
often does that seem to happen?
very, very rarely. That
Good.
I've run into that maybe 2 or 3 times in 4 or 5 years. It's not
Yeah.
very often, but sometimes again, this is like where you have to kind of hold the client's hand. Is that maybe the client has given the agency or the production house a very specific budget, and so
Yeah.
they're trying to stick with it. So the studio will post the job for X number of dollars for this usage, and then once they find someone they want, they're like, "Oh, by the way, the client wanted to add this, so we'll just add another $250." And I'm like, No, no. 250, not enough, sorry."
Okay, this has been wonderful. So many nuggets. Now, as we land the plane here, I want to ask you one final thing, and this is going to be big for everyone that's been watching and taking notes and listening. If someone is, whether they're just getting into voiceover, and feel free to change your answer depending, but if they're just getting into voiceover, or maybe they've been training and doing it a little while, but regardless of where they're at, they're thinking about joining a pay-to-play site. They're thinking about it. What advice would you give that person that's thinking about joining a pay-to-play site? Maybe some advice you wish you had gotten before you joined. And then after you answer that, what are some good pay-to-play sites that you recommend and why?
Cool. I'll start with the pay-to-play sites that I recommend and why, because that's
Okay,
fairly easy.
awesome.
If you're starting out, Upwork has some pretty decent access to some half well-paying jobs. Sometimes there's great jobs on there. I booked a Coca-Cola commercial that played in Singapore on Upwork. So there is good stuff on there sometimes. I do feel like you're dealing with slightly less educated clients because Upwork is really a platform for like freelance web designers, editors, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they're not the platform isn't super well set up for voice actors. Neither is there like a recommended fee structure. But Upwork would be one place that I recommend. I would, after hearing many chats with many different industry people, I would probably stay away from Fiverr. Um, or work on Fiverr for a year to get yourself a handful of projects booked, and
Yeah.
then, maybe get some final audio you can use for a demo or something.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't stay on there for forever. I also feel like that market's very saturated because you have to offer something for $5. And
Yeah.
I always say, like, I don't turn the lights on in my studio for less than 100 American. So,
Right.
like, to
Right.
offer something for $5, I'm just like, I'd need to be in here already working and have
Yeah.
10 $5 jobs roll in that take me 2 minutes each. Then I'll
Yeah.
do your job for $5.
Yeah.
Otherwise, voices.com I'm on. I have a platform on Voice123. I get invites to jobs. I don't pay for a premium membership there yet, though.
Right.
I've also worked on Bidalgo, which is a nice European site that sometimes are looking for North American voices.
I booked a job for Volkswagen on Bidalgo.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I remember like and keep in mind this is very, very lucky because I joined like the free version,
Yeah.
where you don't, and so basically I was just kind of like, I'll join the free version, and then I just kind of forgot about it. And I got an email one day and they were like, we heard your voice, we love it, would you do this? And I was like, oh. So like I wasn't even trying and it happened. So I mean,
Yeah.
things can come up, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's the only
Totally.
experience I've had on there.
Yeah. So I think it's a good site. You're not getting as many auditions, but you're also not paying as much. I feel like the membership
Yeah.
there was like $40 a month or $30 a month or something. It wasn't too crazy.
Crazy, yeah.
What else? Those are kind of the only three that I've ever spent any time on. Voices, Voice123, and Bidalgo. I guess the big pump for Bidalgo is it hasn't been bought out by a larger corporation. I think it's the only
Oh.
voice website that hasn't been bought out by a larger corporation. So
Okay.
Voices has been sold to a bigger company. Voice123 is owned by a larger corporate company, which many people say, because of capitalism, yay, it means that eventually, like, they're going to eventually join the race to the bottom and just keep
Yep.
trying to offer services for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to get more traffic, to get more
Yep.
profits out of their platform fees and memberships and
Yeah.
whatever else. Bidalgo is usually referred to as like the mom and pop voiceover
Ah.
platform. So,
Okay. Yeah, because I have noticed, and I mean, really, we could say this about so many different industries, but I have noticed as far as like pay to plays and voiceover, like I remember back when I was really actually full on going into voiceover, but now the audio side of things has taken over so much time. I don't really do VO anymore. But back when I was really doing VO, I remember I wish I could remember the name of the site. It wasn't voices.com, but it's voice something or voices something. I can't remember. It was a new platform.
yeah.
And it started out with a bang. Like, okay, they're being fair, and that's what they wanted to be fair because the guy that started it, his wife was a voice actor. And so he was like, all right, I want to be fair to voice actors. And so it started out for the first like 6 months being fair. And then after about 6 months, woo, it started taking a dive to the bottom, like
Yeah.
pretty much almost every site I've seen so far. So would you say one site, if you could pick one site, they can only join one site that maybe is maintained a little more than the rest of them, what would that be?
I would probably, maybe not surprisingly, just because of my experience with it, I would probably still pick voices.com because they still have a large handle on the marketplace, which means that a lot of jobs are going through there. Now,
Yeah.
they shift the algorithm every once in a while, so you have to learn how to like tag your demos and set up your profile in order to get the proper job sent to your inbox.
Yeah.
They've also throttled and unthrottled the number of auditions that come to different membership levels a few times. Right now, they're in a really great spot. If you sign up and set up your profile, you're looking at 25, 30 plus auditions every day, even on like the base tier. Whereas before, I'd usually fight to try to get my auditions up to like 15, 18 in a day.
Yeah.
But now, like, without trying, if I don't do 20 in a day, I wake
Yeah.
up with 15 or 20 in my inbox before 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I
Nice.
know that another 15 or 20 or 30 are going to come in. So
Right.
it can be a lot of work. So I would say that. I know lots of other people swear by Upwork and Fiverr and
Yeah.
Bidalgo and I don't know, Voice Bunny or all these other ones.
I don't know.
But for me, I've been on it since 2019. I understand the pitfalls and
Yeah.
the positives and the negatives. And
Yeah.
right now, it's where I'm at. I would like to expand to voice 1, 2, 3 eventually.
Yeah.
Right now, I just don't really have the bandwidth for it because
Yeah.
I'm not doing voiceover full time. I'm doing it, full time when I'm not working elsewhere. But when I shoot or do theater or whatever, then I'm not in the studio. So right now, it seems to be the most bang for my buck as far as how many auditions I see and what I can handle output wise.
Yeah. And something you said that I want to circle back to because it's so important, I think, for viewers to hear this is knowing the pitfalls. That is such a big deal. If you join a pay to play, the best thing you can do is know the pitfalls, know where to go, oh, not doing that job, and where to go, oh, that's fine, that's fair, I'll do that. And then the other thing I would say, which we kind of touched on a little bit, is if you are just starting out, like you're just starting out as a voice actor, a pay-to-play site can be a huge deal because it can get you in the flow of the process and like doing, like, oh, here's an audition. I'm reading the scripts, or I'm reading the specs. I'm figuring out what they want. I'm gonna audition, record it, edit it, send it over. You're getting in the flow of how this stuff works if you ever were to get with an agent or just stay on a pay-to-play. But I think it's a really awesome way to get your feet wet and kind of get an understanding of how the industry works. But again, what you said is huge. Know the pitfalls, know when and when not to do something.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely all the sites have them in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. Like if I'm gonna rag on Fiverr again, like the thing is, lots of people go to Fiverr for a cheap voiceover or a cheap web designer or whatever. So
Yeah.
that means there is traffic on the site, and you can get hired and you can get paid money. And of course, if you become successful there, you can do tons of 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, $50 jobs and
Yeah.
make a decent income as a side gig or a full-time gig. There's lots of full-time Fiverr people. But for me, the time, the energy working that algorithm
Yeah.
versus working the voices algorithm, I find it so much easier to work the voices algorithm where I don't have to like make a video for my profile and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can just post demos that I record in my studio because my audio quality is primo.
Yep.
And I can use those and tag them appropriately to make sure I'm fed the right jobs. And then
Yeah.
when the right jobs come in, I can audition for them. When the wrong jobs come in, I can delete them or save them to the end of the day. If I run out of auditions, I can circle back to the ones that I was kind of unsure about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if someone is starting out, I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily recommend like, hey, join a pay to play tomorrow. You got your microphone. Like
Right.
I'd, like what everyone says. It's so funny. That's what I did. I had a friend that was doing pay to play and they were like, oh, you get like this microphone and this headphone and then like hang a lot of blankets in a closet and, you can get pretty good audio quality and then kind of, dive in.
Yeah.
A year later, I said to her, I said, thank you so much for not telling me everything else I needed to know because I probably wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have like bought a microphone and just joined the platform had
Yeah.
I known I know nothing about audio quality. I know nothing about treating a space. I know so I mean, it got me started and that's great. But
Yeah.
looking back, I think I would have done what basically everyone recommends. Take some classes, see if you like it, see what your
Yes.
hits are and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems I had for the first like year was that I wasn't really sure what to audition for and what to pass on
Yeah.
because your audition time is so valuable. That's the job. The job is auditioning. The booking is the bonus, right? That's what
Right.
Bryan Cranston says.
Yeah.
So like what you audition for matters a lot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that I wish I would have known ahead of time. For me personally, it's a game changer to understand audio quality and to have someone like yourself assess a space and talk to you about quality and all that sort of stuff. Because of that class, I know why when I rent a Neumann TLM 103, why it looks the way in the waveform that it does.
Yeah.
Because it captures so much low end. And I know that
Yes.
just applying a simple high pass means that microphone in this space acts just like my 416.
Right.
But like not having that knowledge, I'd be like, why is this mic so noisy? Everything is so loud.
You'd be like, my
waveform
noise floor
so-"
is insane.
Yeah, my noise.
Yeah.
I put a TLM 103 in here. My noise floor goes from -75 to like -52.
Right.
Like
right.
it's outrageous.
Yes.
But a high pass at 70 or 80
Yeah.
hertz or kilohertz, whatever, like that immediately
Gets
now
fixed.
it's quiet again.
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, those are all the frequencies that the human ear can't hear. So I'm
Yeah.
totally fine throwing a high pass on them.
Yeah. And it's the first thing an audio engineer is going to do to your audio anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a huge, because that's something I tell people is like, what's your noise floor? And they're like, well, what number should I be looking for? And I'm like, I can give you a range. But the difference is it depends on what the noise is, because if it's a hiss or like a white noise and you're hitting this range, that's a problem. But if
Yeah.
it's a bunch of subharmonic content, super low end stuff, and it's hitting up here, it's not as bad because you can just high
Yeah.
pass that out. You
My
know,
lack of education a few years ago is why I picked this mic
right,
over a 103 because
right,
I rented both, had them
yeah,
both in my studio, and was just like, the 103 is so loud. Like, my audio is so garbage.
yeah,
I
and it
can't use this
wasn't
microphone. But
right,
it
right,
wasn't. It
yeah.
just captures a lot of low frequencies.
And it doesn't hurt to have the 416 because this is why I tell people, they're like, oh, do I need to get the 416 or do I need to get a TLM 103? And I'm like, you don't need to get those microphones, but it
No.
doesn't hurt when you do. Here's why. It's like you don't need it because no one on the other end is going to know that you're on a 103 unless you tell them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they do carry that name. And if you tell them I'm on a 103 or a 416, their eyes sparkle, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I've sent you raw audio from a 416, a TLM 103, and my Sennheiser MK4.
Yeah.
And the audio is, to like my ear, barely distinguishable. The
Right.
differences.
Yeah.
Barely. Like
And
my MK4 doesn't catch as much low end, but it
yeah.
sounds in this space very similar to the 103.
Yeah.
The warmth and the kind of the full body of the voice that it captures
Yeah.
versus this, which I think is hyper realistic. A
Yeah.
bit more of that like high end.
It's got
a bit
that
more
high
cutting.
boost. Yeah.
Yeah, that high
Yeah.
boost for sure. You
Yeah.
can hear that and you can hear like the hyper realism of it.
Yeah.
And that's great. But
Yeah.
like at least now I know.
Exactly. But this is like also something that I tell people is like, this is why I say microphone shootouts are complete BS, because it doesn't matter what mic is best for your voice, because it's, as long as you get your space treated the way that it needs to be treated, and as long as you're using a microphone that fits the parameters of what checks the boxes for voiceover work,
Right.
it doesn't matter. You could be on a 103, you could be on a 416, you could be on a Rode NT1 for the rest of your career, and it's going to be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that was a conversation that I had with you.
Yeah.
And in the early days, I was like, should I
Yeah.
get a 103? Should I get a 416? Should I get an NT1?
Right.
And you kind of said, you can and you can't. It doesn't matter and it
Yeah.
does. And it's
Right,
those
right.
kinds of conversations, those realistic conversations that I
Yeah.
enjoy. Again,
Yeah.
I wanted to have the best audio quality possible, and I want
Yeah.
I want my profile to pop on different pay-to-play sites. So
Yeah.
I want the buzz of having a 416,
Absolutely,
having the
yeah.
Bear Dynamic headphones, having
Yeah.
all those kind of like industry standard check boxes. I
Yeah.
want to
If
have
they
those
see
boxes
those,
checked.
they're
Yeah.
like, oh, he's a professional,
Well, yeah, because
When
no
you
one drops
absolutely
no one
could be
drops
the opposite.
1,300 no one drops 1,300 Canadian on a microphone that they can't afford. At least I didn't. I
Right.
waited until I had been doing it for a couple of years, saved up
Yeah.
the money from voice jobs, and then kind
Yeah.
of went, you know what? I've got 1,300 Canadian. I'll go buy this mic now.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, you better be able to back it up if you get that mic, because there are some people out there that will purchase that mic in the beginning and think that that's going to bring them success. And then if somebody sees, oh, they're on a 416, all right, they must be professional. And then they hear your take and then they also hear your audio in a space that's not treated. And they're like, oh, they're not professional. So, you know, just be like, it all goes back to what you said a little while ago, which is like, if you're just starting out, just train to find out if you like voiceover, and not just to find out if you like voiceover, but just to learn all the things that you're going to need if you do indeed find out that you like it.
Yeah.
Don't buy a crazy expensive mic and treat your home studio and do all this crazy stuff and then go, you know what? I actually don't like this and I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I have a few friends that are actors that have agents, and they ask me about gear. And
Yeah.
I always just default to, get the Rode XLR USB, or get the Audio Technica AT2020 USB version. Like,
Yeah.
get a mic so that your auditions for your agent will sound better.
Yeah.
So you're not sending them on your laptop mic or your phone mic.
Right.
To me, that's like $150 Canadian, well spent, to just get a
Yes.
nice condenser microphone. I'm like, so buy that so you have something better. Then once you have it for a purpose, for
Yeah.
better voiceover auditions for your agent, now start messing around with making blanket tents,
Yeah.
out of your duvet, or go into your closet where all the clothes are and set up some space in there. See
Yeah.
how you hear the audio being like sounding different.
Yeah. It's all
Then
experience.
from there you can start taking the steps of like, take some classes. What are you interested in? Video games, commercials?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to do? Animation? And
Yeah.
then you can kind of move forward from there.
Right. This is wonderful, dude. Thank you so much for giving us all of your wisdom. You know so much about this industry, and especially like what you do specifically. But let me say, where can someone find you if they want to hire you to do a voiceover for them?
Oh, all right. So you can go to my website, justinbott.com. That's justinbott.com. You can go to Justin Bottom Mike on Instagram. That's justin.bott.mike on Instagram.
Greatest name ever.
Thank you very much. Using my last name for all it's worth.
That's right.
Yeah, those are the two easiest places to find me. You can check out some recent work or some demos on my website, and there's a contact form there. You can get in touch. Happy to do anything and everything.
In perpetuity, right?
Absolutely not.
Thank you so much, Justin. It's been such an awesome time getting to speak with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me, and keep these up because I think everyone's got lots to learn, myself included. I watched your other one, and there's stuff for everyone to learn from other people's VO businesses and their practices. So it's super helpful.
I really appreciate it, man. I'm gonna have you back.
All right, sounds
All
good.
right. Bye.
See ya.
By drinking Coca-Cola, you can win over $200,000 worth of prizes. Scan the QR. Type in the code. Join and win now. Buying your groceries in your pajamas is a liberating experience, I can tell you. But it is best to be at home. That's right. Monday.com gives any company, like Hulu, Wix, and Peloton, the power to create and run any workflow they need in one easy-to-use platform.
These cans of chili are perfectly good.
Yeah, my cousin left those. Spicy food isn't really my thing.
And this pasta?
I'm trying to cut down on the carbs. If you're looking for work, then Employment Solutions is looking for you. Ow. Yeah, this dry, chalky air isn't helping at all.
It's time to vaporize.
I beg your pardon?
It's okay. Here.
Vicks Vapo Cool Severe? You really are a keeper. Who knew that the hardest part of being an adult was figuring out what you were gonna cook every night for the rest of your life? Hallelujah! Let's make good food, everyone.